This is why I say good morning and welcome once again to all our listeners, those of you at Classic Radio, those of you viewing GBN TV. Welcome to another edition of the Mid-Morning Buzz here on Classic Radio, GBN TV. Good morning to those of you also via social media platforms, whether it's a YouTube channel, Facebook page. Good morning and welcome once again. Let me say good morning to my guest. That's Mr. Chris Deriggs. Good morning to you, sir. How are you doing this morning? Welcome to the Mid-Morning Buzz.
Good morning, GT. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning.
All right, and welcome. Should I say happy advance Independence Day, or we should just say happy Independence in general already?
Well, you could say it. I mean, although we enjoy the thing.
We enjoy it. We enjoyed it. We here this morning to have a bit of a little chit chat. Of course, pertaining to we our theme for this of course one people, one journey, one future, and our perspective of discussion for this segment is of course towards the next 50 years. Now, folks will say, hey, why are we focusing on the next 50 years already? You understand? But let's start from the initial stages. We are 50 years. Let's talk about some of the achievement that we have seen over the of course a couple of decades ago that led us to where we are now. How would you go about with that for me this morning?
Well, in the last 50 years, a lot has changed. If you think back 50 years ago, Grenada had not yet experienced a revolution. And it's an event that has been cataclysmic in its impact on Grenada. And we're still living through the consequences and trying to see how we can learn from that whole experience. We had not yet done a whole lot of infrastructure that you see around and take for granted. The National Stadium, the cruise ship complex, all these things were not there as yet. And then there are some intangibles. We had not yet put a player on the West Indies cricket team. Think about that. Think
about that.
We tend to take that for granted now, and so on. And we had not dreamed that we were going to win a world championship in the quarter mile. Kirani James, Olympic gold medalist, and other stalwarts in the sporting arena, Anderson Peters, and so on. So there's a lot that has happened in I would say in an accelerated way, and sometimes it is difficult to predict how change will happen. So it's difficult enough to project for the next decade, far less the next 5 decades.
Yes.
Nonetheless, we have a duty, a responsibility to create blueprints for the future. And then there are so many moving parts in the global scheme of things. There are so many what I call mega trends that are happening now, and which will affect in a big way how we move forward in the next 5 decades. Yet for all, in this situation, we have to plan, and we have to mitigate against things that can happen to undermine our plans.
All right. You mentioned something there that tickled my mind. There's a lot of things that we have achieved and we still haven't achieved within the last 50 years. You mentioned, 50 years ago, we would have thought, thinking that we would have had someone playing on the West Indies team, as you mentioned. We would have think of having a national stadium. We would have probably thought the last 50 years, would we have a cruise ship terminal the way it is today? So lots have happened for this little island of ours. That sometimes we as a people may have thought would have been impossible.
Well, yes, we didn't have the vision. Martin Luther King said he had been to the mountaintop and seen the future. I don't think we actually have been to the mountaintop, many of us, but we try nonetheless to see the future. Look, we have a prime minister in Grenada now. I don't think he was born 50 years ago. I think he's younger than 50.
Yes, he is.
And so think about that. That in itself is very thought-provoking. And then you can look at the global situation, not just in Grenada. Look at the emergence of China as a global superpower in the last 50 years. And look at the wars that have happened, which impact us and will continue to impact us going forward. The change in the international trading environment and so on, and what does it mean? And the whole explosion of artificial intelligence, the digital economy, and you can go on and on. A lot has happened in the last 50 years.
Lots have happened. But then the question is, what are we looking forward towards in the next 50 years?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I want to believe that when I think of Grenada as a sovereign state, and we can refer to Grenada as a small island nation state. And there's a lot of discussion about nation these days, and what is a state and what's a nation. A nation is a group of people who are sharing common cultural characteristics, language maybe, religion, and so on. So we can speak of a Yoruba nation, a Coromantee nation, a Cherokee nation. These are groups that have a certain ethnic commonality, as opposed to a state, which is a political entity that is organized. And if it's an independent state, such an entity may have a constitution, might have a flag, a national anthem, and you might look at an executive body that, your cabinet and these things, your legislative body. You might look at your judiciary and so on. All these are components and so on. I'm thinking about, as we move forward in the next 50 years, how do we mature?
Yeah.
Because it's when we talk of independence, I see it as a journey into maturity. It's a journey. It's not a static place that you arrive at and stay there. It's a journey of self-discovery, and I'm thinking that in 50 years, I'd like to see a consolidated Grenada in a consolidated place of self-discovery. A nation state that is holding its own in the global arena and continuing to punch above our weight, because we're already doing that. So I want to see maturity, in our political structures, a kind of democracy that brings a level of participation and a tolerance for differences among people in their thinking and philosophies. And of course, there are other things, you want to see your health system, that is maybe state of the art, right? In spite of our smallness, you want to ensure that the education system is serving a global community, that Grenada's education system is global in its excellence. You want to see that, our creative arts straddling the world, our artists performing in Tokyo, in Berlin, and earning foreign exchange, and for Grenada providing employment. And you want to see all these things happen. I get excited.
Well, how would you say? How are we to progress to that towards that next 50? How are we to progress towards that? As you said, you don't have that crystal ball, but how are we to progress from where we at now, at 50 now? How are we to progress towards that?
Well, it begins with planning and visioning. Right now, the Legacy Committee, which is led by Dr. Wendy Grenada, I've been doing an excellent job going around Grenada and Carriacou and Petit Martinique, engaging people, getting the thoughts and ideas from the belly of the Grenadian community. And those ideas should be harvested and formally streamlined for inclusion in some kind of national plan for Grenada's development. You can call it something sexy, like plan, 50-50. There was this thing about 2020 vision and so on.
Yes.
So if we look at the next 50 years, plan 50, whatever, but you need a plan. And that plan comes from engagement with people. It's too often we make the mistake of executively handing down plans to people, and they don't embrace it. And as a result of that, they don't work towards its achievement.
And then it lost its whole fruition.
So I think it begins with planning, and we must ensure that that it's not just something among the intellectuals, right? We have to hear from the man in the street. And obviously, the intellectual has a greater span of the globe and a greater sense of history, and has something to add but we need to make sure that it comes from the belly of the people.
Now, you spoke of legacy. How can we use the legacy that we have accomplished within this particular 50 to go towards the next one?
Well, when we look back at our history, we sometimes are looking at it through the myopic lens of those who colonize us. And I've often said it, that history is written by those who win.
Yeah.
And I made a comment last week, a few days ago on Kellan Bob's program, that imagine what the history of the world would have looked like if Hitler had won the Second World War. Right? And
lots of folks may not have thought of it that way.
and think of what's unfolding in the United States at this point in time. The assault on truth. And it's much easier to conduct this assault on truth because of the digital media, and things can go viral in a second. But when we look back at our history, we must try to look back at it and empower ourselves in the process. So the narrative of self-denigration, the narrative that made us feel that we were 3/5 of a human being and so on, we have to abandon that narrative. And when we look at our heroes, we have to understand that these were real human beings with their flaws and strengths. So we cannot look back at history and be angry, in our analysis. We have to be as dispassionate as possible when we look at the people who we might consider to be heroes. And so there are names that people are calling. I hear the Caribbean singing. I was up in Sotel the other night, and talking about Fedor and Gary and Marichaud, T. Marichaud, and Maurice Bishop and so on. Yes. But history didn't begin with Fedor and so on. What about the Caribs who were there?
Yes.
And they led this epic resistance against the French colonials in 1651. Who was the Carib chief who might have led the resistance against the French? Maybe we need a monument for a man like that. You understand what I'm saying?
I would believe so. I would believe so.
Yeah. So
because he has set a path.
A path of resistance?
Yes.
And our entire history, look at Fedor, and Fedor represents a chapter in Grenada's struggle for self-assertion, struggle for independence, and we still struggling to consolidate on our independence. We are an independent nation.
Yes.
But we're not independent of the world around us, and because we're still not feeding ourselves. We are independent. We have political independence. And so I'm not, advancing a narrative that we are not independent. We are an independent nation. Okay? We manage to our own foreign affairs. But however, we need to build critical mass in the way we interact. We need to be to build the strength of CARICOM, build the strength of all the different alliances and groupings that we form part of, because to combat and as to swim in those rough waters, we need critical mass and so on. So look at the heroes, right? Look at it as dispassionate as possible, and understand that independence is a journey and not a static arrival.
I have spoken to lots of historians for the last couple of weeks. And you mentioned a word that everyone seemed to also be capitalizing on: resistance. In a sense that the resistance that we have had from back then that has brought us to where we are now. How can are we still on that path of resistance towards the next 50?
Well, I think, as history evolves, we struggle against different forces. Okay? So the resistance before 1834, obviously, was to break the back of chattel slavery. The resistance subsequent to that had to do with the assertion of people who were trying to eke out an existence in a post-slavery society. And so that the struggle had to do with access to land, And later on, the peasants and small farmers would have had to deal with issues pertaining to getting fair prices for their fruits and vegetables and growing provisions and things like that and so on. Then as a nation, struggling to become an independent state or a state, we had to struggle to get home rule. T.M. Show played his part in that regard, the Woods Commission and all these things, going to England and interceding with the Undersecretary for Colonial Affairs and things like that. And so it took you into what Gary was struggling for against was the exploitation by the plantocracy of agricultural workers, and then of course the road workers. They also were struggling for that. So we struggle. As history evolved, we struggle for different things. But there's a common thread of resistance. People struggling for their rights. People struggling for their rights to live in a decent way, to be able to feed their families. And then later on, struggling for social ascendancy, for education, struggling to get a job in a bank or places that seem to be reserved for Grenadians of color and things like that. But as time has gone by, you can say maybe the struggle has advanced to a higher level, if you want to call it that. And what we are independent as a nation, but do we command the prices that we sell our cocoa and nutmeg for? All right, and so there are struggles to be fought in multilateral institutions like the World Trade Organization, so that we can get a fair deal. We want to be the North-South dialogue, which tries to ensure that the South gets a fair shake in global affairs. We are part of that now, and say other things. So you talk about resistance as a thread.
Yes.
That runs throughout, but it's going, as the song say, going up and up and up as we struggle and confront different challenges in history.
All right. Now, the thought that come to mind is maintaining ourselves as a people, our sovereignty as we move forward. Yes, we have gone through the last 50 years as an independent nation. We're looking forward. Me or you may not be around to maybe. I always want to live up to 100. Yeah, you may not be wrong to see when our sons and daughters live to celebrate the next 50. Well, it would not be another 50. It will be 100 this time around. What would you say? What would you say, or what advice would you give to the nation as a whole, as we move forward?
Well, I don't want to be as presumptuous, to offer advice to the nation, but I would think that there are some things that will always matter.
Yeah.
First of all, we have to accept that although we're struggling for unity, it does not mean that we are homogeneous, that we must think in a straitjacketed, narrow way.
I agree.
I often say, let a million flowers bloom. And I believe, therefore, that maturity calls for tolerance. So the Grenada we are seeking to build is one which does not descend into violence when people differ in their political outlook or their religious beliefs. It calls for tolerance, it calls for accommodation. Maturity means that we must struggle for things that really matter, or unite, form a common platform for things that really matter. So our major objectives regarding our healthcare system, our education system, certain aspects of our infrastructural development, our major objectives regarding our user rights and rights of access to public places. We cannot sell Camahon Park. Everybody had to unite around these things. So, so full credit must be given to the current administration for ensuring that is securely in the hands of Grenadian people and expanding it. Right? These are rights that are sacred and so on, and the country is small, so we can't just give up all the land and thing. There are some things, therefore, that as a nation, regardless of where we're coming from, we have to unite on a common platform around these kinds of things. We have a national flag, we have a national anthem, and all these things. We should respect these things, regardless of who is in power. and we must always respect these things. We have to ensure that we curate our tangible heritage so that future generations, and the current generation too, could appreciate and enjoy these things. This is part of our Grenadian heritage. It is part of our psychological frame of reference. It's part of our history. It help us understand who we are and so on. So these are, in terms of advice, I think we have to unite around the fundamentals for the Grenadian, for the development of Grenada.
All right. And my final question I want to: how could we build? How we could continue to build on our what we have accomplished? Our accomplishments thus far.
Well, first of all, we need to achieve some understanding of what these accomplishments are. And it calls for open discussion and respectful discussion as to what constitutes accomplishments. And these things will not just evolve spontaneously. You can set up formal bodies and organizations working with terms of reference, specified objectives, whether it is in the field of agriculture. How do we manage agriculture going forward, for example? Grenada has a tourism authority, and tourism forms a big part of the economy of Grenada. And so you have a Ministry of Tourism, and you have a tourism authority. Look at agriculture.
So it may seem separated if somebody's
look at agriculture.
Yeah.
We have a Ministry of Agriculture. Is there an agricultural authority that crafts policy, given the importance of, that seeks to bring talent from all different sides of the country to develop that sector of the economy? So I'm saying it calls for organization and planning in the field of culture and the creative arts, which is where I formally sit down, and I've been doing so for decades. There's a lot that can be done. We're having festivals. Which of these festivals really speak to our heritage and who we are? And are we helping? Do we have a manual to organize these festivals so that at the parish-based organizations, these festivals can be run in a manner which can link up in a way with, say, tourism, for example. The Cameroon Festival in St. Patrick's, bringing people in from all over the diaspora who come from the parish of St. Patrick's. Let them come and enjoy the Cameroon Festival. Relive the history. So I'm talking about planning in a deliberate manner, right? And that's how we get things done. So we have vision, but I think what we need to do is develop the ability to capture these ideas and develop plans, and then have the organizational mechanisms to make it happen.
All right, great. Mr. Deriggs, I want to thank you so much for being on the program this morning. Lots of information shared. Any closing comments you want to make before we take a wrap for today?
Well, I just want to wish all within earshot of this particular program a happy independence. There's a lot happening. Go out and enjoy these events. Unite and be proud of your Grenadianness at this point in time. Wear your national colors. Big up Grenada, 50 years and moving on. All right.
And you just pour a new word on me. I like you say Grenadianness. I used to say Grenadianism. You understand? Well, I like Grenadianness. Thank you once again, so for being on the Mid-Morning Buzz. Of course, I appreciate you being here and sharing information that you shared. And I sure our listening and viewing audience did, of course, absorb what you said a whole lot. Thanks once again.
Thanks, my brother.
Take it easy, my man. Talk a bit. Hey, folks, that's how we take a wrap for this edition of the Mid-Morning Buzz. Join again for another edition. That's what we say goodbye.